two levels in Chatzar, since it says Chatzerecha. So Chatzerecha is the plural, so two levels of Chatzar. There's a Chatzar, a closed-in, roofed-in courtyard, and an open courtyard. The open courtyard means the level that has to enclose is a level that encloses the animals, and that's a lower level, the level of animals. That shows on the coarseness of the nefesh habahamis itself. But for the nefesh hasichlis, which comes from a higher level of klipas noiga, over there, because of seichel's urge to fly upwards, that also feeds its ego more, and because its ego is fed more, it needs further protection. Just like for birds not to fly out, you need to have a roofed-in courtyard. And now the Rebbe is going to use this to explain an interesting halacha. Now we mentioned earlier that a closed-in courtyard, if it is without a roof, has, if it's a size of a base of sign, 2 saws, and it doesn't have a roof, so then midairaisa it's considered a private domain, and midrabanan it's considered a karmelis. Why is there this difference of the rabbanon versus the araisa? That's what we're going to approach now, based on this explanation of the difference between the roofed-in courtyard to the roofless courtyard. Ois Gimel, 3rd page of the Maimer, Kuf Nun Ches. According to this, we can explain the fact this halacha, that a chotzer that doesn't have a roof is like a karmelis, is something that's midrabanan. That the Rabbanan said that's not a rishus hayachid. We give it a this type of neutral or semi-border zone where midrabanan you can't carry in it like a rishus haram, you cannot carry from it in a rishus hayachid like a rishus hayachid, like a rishus haram, etc. What does it mean in the avoid of a person guarding the nefesh habahamis versus guarding the nefesh hasichlis? So when we're guarding an animal, it's primarily focused on thought, speech, and deed. Because of the desires of the animal soul, it's possible that the person will stumble in some prohibited thing. How does one guard the animal? They should go through making a fence and closing the courtyard, the place, the area where the behemoth finds itself. You need to enclose it with walls, with separations. What does the spiritual idea of this enclosure mean? Not to do what he wants to do. It's enclosing, it's cutting off, it's separating to do only what he's supposed to do. That is the protection of the nefesh habahamis. You don't need to have a roof, you only need to have the walls. And guarding the birds in the avoid of a person, that's concerning the more refined aspects of klipas noiga, that because he has a nefesh hasichlis, therefore this could feed his ego. It's primarily focused on the inner soul powers, the intellect and the emotions. Because of his ego and because of his arrogance, how does he have this arrogance? Because he's an intellectual being. So therefore he has greater ego than the nefesh habahamis. As it says in the pasuk, it says in Mishlei, you see a person who feels that he's wise in his own eyes. So for that type of thing, when you're trying to protect not just from thought, speech, and deed, but you're trying to protect that the person's emotions and intellect should be in the correct place. It's insufficient to surround the courtyard with walls, even when he is controlled and contained in his thought, speech, and deed. And he can even be so far contained, he can even be on the level of a Beinoni that never did an Aved in his entire life. Still in all because of his arrogance and his coarseness, the intellect and the emotions that are in him are in a coarse manner. Therefore, he needs that his courtyard should be not just having walls to contain his behemoth, his animal, to make sure he doesn't transgress in thought, speech, and deed. He needs, in addition to that, a roof. Now that we said the roof is like we said, we gave the example, the yarmulke on top of the head, that he recognizes how wondrous that there's something over him, that there is a wondrous aspect of godliness which is beyond his perception and beyond what he can comprehend. So now, how come this distinction? How come min ha-Torah it's considered Reshus HaYachid with mechitzas alone, but midrabanan you need to have also a roof to be considered a Reshus HaYachid. We know Reshus HaYachid means a domain having to do with Yechidei Shel Olam, with Alakus. So he's saying the difference is what Torah says is like the basic minimum versus what the Chachamim are asking us to reach on a higher level. So he says, fourth line from the bottom of the paragraph, since action is primary and the most important part, therefore, even a courtyard that has no roof over it is called a private domain, the only one of the world. But from the approach of the Rabbanon, what is the purpose of the Chachamim? The Chachamim is not just to ensure that just we follow and do everything in thought, speech, and deed that's right, but it's even more so to spiritually elevate the person, raise up the person to a higher level, that the person should be a vessel for godliness. Also from the perspective of his intellect and his emotions, he should have this connection with godliness. And the Rebbe says in the footnote, because really the intellect and the emotions are the core of who the person is. Like it says in Tanya, as opposed to the thought, speech, and deed are only garments. So therefore, the Chachamim want that the person who he is should be in an elevated and higher state. That the very person, and the person is his intellect and emotions, like we just now brought down from the footnote. So the person should be a private domain, it's to the Eibishter's unity and oneness, that he's totally devoted, and he's singular, and he's the only thing to the Eibishter's oneness, through having the covering of the roof. So that is the reason why we have this distinction in halacha that a place that has no roof, that is enclosed by mechitzas, if it's a certain size, will be midaraisa, it'll be Reshus HaYachid, but midrabanan that's not enough, because the Rabbanan want to raise up a person to a higher level than just thought, speech, and deed, which is containing the animals. He wants to also raise up that also the intellect and the emotion should be contained as well. That is the birds, to make sure that it's roofed in. Oizdalt. Since the intellect of the nefesh hasichlis on its own, before having exposure to the intellect of the nefesh halakis, so the intellect of nefesh hasichlis on its own is yesh, and the truth is, like Yisungin explained, even afterwards, that is after it's been exposed, it's still what its own nature is versus its exposure. Even more so that the intellect is from Klippas Noiga, like we said before. True, it's from a higher level of Noiga, it's from a Dakus, the more subtle level of Noiga, but it's still from Klippas Noiga. Therefore, even after the intellect of the intellectual soul comprehends the distance of his level in comparison to godliness, he sees how far he is from the Eibishter. That his comprehension in matters of godliness is in such a way that it is limited and it's also coarsened. Like we said before, the Nefesh HaSichlis realizes that he doesn't get the true, even the aspect of godliness that is comprehensible, we said yesterday, he still doesn't truly get it. That's the idea of having the roof. The roof indicates and tells it, you don't, even what you do understand, you're not really understanding it thoroughly. So what does it affect in the Nefesh HaSichlis? Through that the Nefesh HaSichlis comes to a state of bit. Habitl Shalah, but yet, after all of that, Habitl Shalah Eina Be'erech Klal Habitl Nefesh HaLekis. The bittul of the Nefesh HaSichlis of the intellectual soul is totally incomparable to the bittul of the godly soul. How come? In what way? The Nefesh HaLekis Habitl Shalah Hi Be'etzem Mitziyusa. Nefesh HaLekis, the bittul is part of its very makeup. The very DNA of the Nefesh HaLekis is about being bottled to the Eibishter. It's about godliness. It's a godly soul. But Nefesh HaSichlis, but in the intellectual soul, habitl shalahi davar nois v'mitziusa, its bittul is something addition to its existence. Ube'etzem b'bechinas yesh, and in essence, it's a state of yesh. Rather, the only reason why it is bittul is because of this roof that's placed over it, by its recognition that Nefesh HaLekis shares with Nefesh HaSichlis, to let it know and to show the Nefesh HaSichlis, this, your understanding is not the way it really is. That's why even a courtyard that has a roof over it, it's still, after all, it's only a courtyard. And what's a courtyard? It's a place where animals are kept. Like we said in Ois Bezer Maimer of Aloydiras Adam. It's not a place of human habitation, the courtyard. How come? It has a roof, it has walls. Isn't that a place where a person should live? Because Ki Adam b'gematria ma. The word Adam's numerical equivalent of ma, which is hu habitol, the Nefesh HaLekis. Ma indicates the bittul of the godly soul. Shenikras Adam, that the godly soul is called Adam. Like it says, Atem kruim Adam, v'loyum esoilam kruim Adam. You are Adam. And how comes Nefesh HaLekis called Adam? Al Shem Edmela Elyon, because I am likened to above. So that bittul makes the Nefesh HaLekis be called Adam. As opposed to the bittul of the animal soul and even of the intellectual soul, it's a bittul yesh. It's the level of an animal that's below a person, except there are different levels of animals. It can be a bird, which is a more refined and edla animal. Like we said, it only needs a shechita of a one siman, because it's made from mud and water. It's not the lowest form of creation, whereas an animal is the lowest form. It's made only from the earth, so therefore its shechita needs to have two siman. But after all is said and done, even a bird falls into the level, the category of an animal, which indicates bittul hayesh. Bittul hayesh also indicates the animal life, because in animals, the way they are bottle is you need to coerce them. It's not something that they have an innate bittul. You need to contain them. Either contain them like you contain an animal, or contain them like containing birds. You're going against their nature. Bittul hayesh. They need to be mevatel their ego. Top of the fourth page of the Maimer, Kuf Nun Tes. V'hinei, so After explaining that there's two levels, nefesh bahamis and nefesh sichlis, these correspond to the two levels of chotzer, an open-roofed chotzer or an closed chotzer. So therefore, in a similar vein, we're going to say the nefesh elokis itself also has two levels, and that's going to be the beisecha and the beischa, v'kodshecha, v'kodshecha, etc. that we have in the rest of the pasuk. Hine gamba bitl nefesh elokis, also in the bitl of the godly soul. Actually, any questions before we go? Hine gamba bitl nefesh elokis shtei madreges b'chlolos. In the bitl of the godly soul, there's two general levels of bitl. Because it's known, so that the nefesh elokis, the godly soul, should be able to affect and influence the animal soul and the intellectual soul. It's through the intellect and the emotions of the godly soul coming down in a measured way and a bounded way, in such a way that they will be associated with the intellectual soul, and even be able to relate to the animal soul. In other words, the nefesh elokis needs to make itself relatable, needs to lower itself, needs to be able to connect with the nefesh sichlis and also with the nefesh bahamis. Va'ad, to such a degree is it relatable to them, they become enclosed in the intellect of the and the emotions of the intellectual soul and the animal soul. And Nimtza comes out that in the intellect and the emotions of the godly soul there are two levels. The way the intellect and the emotions of the nefesh elokis are on their own. And the second level is the way it's enclosed in the intellectual soul and the animal soul. Now the Rebbe is going to go and fine-tune this and say that really you could find these two levels reflected in the lower level, in the level of the intellect and the emotions of the nefesh elokis becoming enclosed in the intellect and emotions, nefesh sichlis, nefesh bahamis. You also have these two levels, according to what's explained in a different place. How can the nefesh elokis have the capability to affect and to change and to refine and to elevate the animal soul? It's because the godly soul is at its very core, its godliness. We could say even that lower level, even the intellect and the emotions of the godly soul, the way it's already enclosed in the nefesh bahamis and in the nefesh sichlis, to affect it, to relate to it, to connect with it, to explain to it, etc. There's both components of the nefesh elokis. The begilui k'moishen gabe nefesh sichlis v'bahamis and in a revealed way, the way the intellect and the emotions are revealed in the perception of the nefesh bahamis and nefesh sichlis, they are already bounded, they're already measured, they're already limited. V'abitl shalahem hu dugmas bitl hayesh, and even the bitl in that intellect and the emotions that the nefesh elokis shares with the nefesh bahamis, nefesh sichlis, are similar to bitl hayesh. Because they are limited, because they are constrained, so therefore they can affect and they can relate to the nefesh sichlis and nefesh bahamis. But internally, even that aspect of the intellect and the emotions that become enclosed in nefesh sichlis and nefesh bahamis, they are still godliness. And because of that, because deep down, even that aspect that becomes enclosed in the nefesh sichlis, nefesh bahamis, our godliness, Therefore, va bittul shalem bittul memitzias. Their bittul is a level of bittul memitzias. Based on this, we're going to come back to what we spoke in the beginning of the Maimer, that the two levels of Chotzer and Bayis and Heichel represent the four worlds of Atzilus, Bri, Yitzir, Asiyah. So it says in Oishei, V'yashloimer, we could say, Shedalad in Yonam Anal, the above four ideas and concepts and levels, Shtei Adargis the Chotzer, Shema Birden, Avshabamis, Vasichlis. The two levels of the courtyard, these are the refinement of the animal soul and intellectual soul. Vishnei and Yonam Bakoch's Nefshalikis. And the two aspects in the powers of the godly soul. K'moishem begilu, the way they are in a revealed way that the nefsha bahamis, nefsha sichlis perceives them. Uk'moishem be'etzem mahusam, and the way they are in their essence. In dugmas dalad ha'ilmus atzilus bri yitzir asiyah. They are similar to the four worlds of Abiyah. The idea behind this is the asiyah v'yitzira he'metzias. The worlds of asiyah and yitzira are already called an existence. Chassidus brings down, even though Brias in the word creation, but really what was just creation was what was just created was just the potential of existence. Chassidus will sometimes use the term hiyuli. It's all in a state of potential. It's like it says at the beginning, the Bereishis bara alchimas ha'shamayim ha'aretz, and the shamayim ha'aretz included everything in potential. So the initial idea of Bria, the word bara, is the first potential. Yitzir is when you're already forming it, and Asiyah is when it's fully made. So the formation and the fully made, that is a Metzias. Bria is only the potential of existence. V'atzilus hi afisas ha-Metzias. And Atzilus is the negation of existence. It's not just that it's not an existence. It is the total opposite of any existence. It's completely godliness. It doesn't allow for existence other than Hashem, meaning there is no existence. It's all about Hashem. That's what it means, afisas ha-Metzias, the negation of existence. And amongst the differences between Asiyah and Yitzira, which is existence, to the world of Bria, which is Efsharas HaMetzias, which is the possibility for existence, is Shabitl Shabasiyah v'Yitzira hu Bitl HaYesh. The Bitl of Asiyah Yitzira is a Bitl HaYesh. Sounds familiar? Like the Nefesh Bahamis. The Kivin Shasiyah v'Yitzira he Metzias, since Asiyah and Yitzira are considered in existence, Habitl Shalahem Shebahem Udavar Noisef Al Metziusam. Their bitl is something additional to their existence. This is not who they are. They are a yesh, and they nullify themselves. They're contained, either contained by walls or contained also by a roof. But they themselves are not a contained being. They themselves are not bottled. But the bitl of Bria, which is only the possibility for existence, so therefore it's a bitl v'metzias, that its entire existence is a state of bitl. So there's a very interesting footnote I want to learn inside. The Rebbe in footnote 31 addresses a very simple question. We know that usually the demarcation line in worlds between Bitl HaYesh and Bitl HaMetzias is Biyah versus Atzilus. Say Bri Yitzir Asiyah, that's Yesh, and therefore the Bitl over there is Bitl HaYesh, and Atzilus is Alakus, so over there it's Bitl HaMetzias. Here, the Maimer, and the Rebbe takes it from a Maimer and Tavshin Vav of the Frierdiker Rebbe, the demarcation line is different. We say that since Asiya and Yitzira are Metzias, so their bittul is not a bittul b'Metzias, their bittul is a bittul hayesh. But since Bria is only of Sharas or Metzias, over there it's going to be bittul b'Metzias. So how do we reconcile these two approaches in Chassidus? So let's look at footnote 31. B'roiv HaMekaymis, in the majority of places in Chassidus, it says shebitl b'Metzias hu ba'atzilus, ubitl hayesh hu b'biyah, that bitl b'Metzias is not tzilus, and bitl hayesh is in biyah. And in our mimer over here, we just now said differently, that even Beria is bitl b'Metzias, and only Yitzira and Asir are bitl hayesh. Yesh loymar, so the Rebbe says we can say as follows: sha'achiluk ben bitl hayesh lo bitl b'Metzias, efshel lefarish b'shnei fanim. The difference between the terms bitl hayesh and bitl b'Metzias lend themselves to two explanations. Aleph, one way of explaining it is bittul hayeshu. What does it mean, the bittul of the yesh? Shebe'etzem hu yesh. If you drill down to its core, you say this is really a yesh. Va'bittul hu davar noisef al mitziyusay. The bittul is something additional to what he is. Bittul b'metziyasu. What does it mean, bittul b'metziyas? Sha'bittul hu ba'etzem mitziyusay. That the very mitziyas itself is a state of bittul. That's like the difference between animals versus human beings. Animals, they need to be coerced because they themselves want to leave the enclosure, so you need to enclose them. But as soon as you get to the level of something that is not animal, Adam, begematria ma, so you have already that it in and of itself, not because of external reasons, it is baki. The Indian said the bittul b'Metzias shayach gam b'Bria, and this type of bittul, that the bittul is part of who it is, that it's applicable also in Bria, the Eiba Rucha Sefer Amarim Tavshin Zayin Sham, like he says in a different place. What about everywhere else in Chassidus, where we usually assign bittul hayesh to Bri Yitzira Asiya and bittul b'Metzias only to the world of Atzilus? He says in Beis, bittul hayeshu sha bittul atzmayu bechinas yesh. It's not that the yesh is something that's being this battle, but the bittul itself is an ego type of bittul. What's it mean, an ego type of bittul? Because it's a result of the very existence, the comprehension and the feeling of the created being. He himself recognizes how he has to be bottled. So the bittul is a result of who he is. Therefore, it's called bittul hayesh. It's a bittul that's coming out of his self. Bittul b'Metzias hu sha'bittul misad alakus. What does it mean, bittul b'Metzias? That the lakus is the cause of the bittul, not because of his recognition. Therefore, it's a true bittul, because the only true bittul is when it's coming from godliness, not from the created being's recognition. We're going to get lenient concerning this definition of bittul hayesh versus bittul b'Metzias. Bittul shebebriya hu bittul hayesh. The bittul that's in the world of bria is a bittul hayesh because it's coming from the being's own recognition. It's coming as a result of the comprehension of the creations. So now let's take it back to the nefesh elokis. We're talking about there's the nefesh elokis, there's the part of the nefesh, there's the aspect of the nefesh elokis, the seichel and midas nefesh elokis, the way they're enclosed in the nefesh bahamis. That is still called, in this other definition, it's called bittul hayesh. Why is it called bittul hayesh? If you remember earlier, we said it's like a bittul hayesh because it has to relate to the nefesh habahamis, nefesh hasichlis. So it's like a level of bittul hayesh. So that's what he's saying in the what's called Shulei Agili, in the footnote to the footnote. We'll stop over here. Any questions?